So let's talk about visibility modifiers now. First, let's understand what the term visibility means here. So, visibility in terms of programming means accessibility. Hence, visibility modifiers are keywords that help us set the visibility or accessibility of variables, functions, classes, objects, constructors, properties, etc. Let's look at an example to understand this. So when we say this particular variable A is not visible inside this function B, we mean that the function B cannot access variable A. Hence, it cannot use variable A. It's a simple concept really, and we have already discussed it in brief when we learnt about the scope of a variable. Now there are 4 types of visibility modifiers in Kotlin. These are public, private, protected, and internal. We will look at each one of them in detail. So let's start with public. Anything declared public is available everywhere in the project. It's just like we think of the word public in our everyday lives. The default visibility for everything is public. Now let's go to private. So, a top-level function or class that is declared private can be accessed only within the file where it is declared. A top-level function is any function defined outside the main function. All the functions that we learned to create before we came to classes were all top-level functions. Also, any member function, constructor, or property declared private can be accessed only inside the class where it is declared. Next, let's come to protected. So, any property or member function declared protected is visible or accessible only within the class and its subclasses where it has been declared. A top-level function cannot be declared protected. Only properties or member functions of a class can be declared protected. Now let's come to internal. Anything declared internal is accessible only within a module. A module is a set of files compiled together. Now that we know the scope of each type of visibility modifier, let's go to our IDE to implement them practically. Now, let's create a new file called functions and create 4 functions with different types of modifiers. Let's create a public function that calculates the sum of integers a and b. Then, a private function that calculates the difference of a and b. Next, we create a protected function that calculates the product of a and b. And finally, an internal function that calculates the division of a by b. Now here if you see, the function product gives an error, since the modifier protected is used only for member functions or properties inside a class. And since we have declared it as a top-level function here, it is throwing an error. So let's comment out this function here. You can also use the shortcut Ctrl+Shift+/ after highlighting the multi-line statements that you want to comment out. Now, let's create another file called main and let's create the main function here. Now let's call the 3 functions we created earlier. So here, we have called all the 3 functions. Now if you see, the functions that were declared public and internal are fine. But the function difference that was declared private is throwing an error here, because private functions are available only within the file where they are declared. And since we are using this function in a different file here, it is throwing an error. So let's comment this out as well. Now, since we cannot have a protected function as a top-level function, let's create a class in this main.kt file here and declare a protected function within the class. So, we have created a class here called product, and inside this we declared a protected function called product. Now let's create an object of this class in the main function. Oops, as you can see, the object throws an error. Let's hover over it to read what it says. So it says that cannot access product, it is protected in product. This proves that we cannot use protected functions outside the class where they are declared. Now the question arises that why do we need visibility modifiers? So, we have the private modifier since sometimes we don't want another class to be able to change the values of a variable of a particular class. Hence, we use private visibility modifier for the class variables. This is also known as data hiding. Sometimes, when we work on large-scale projects being handled by multiple people, there may be a chance that variables in two different classes may end up having the same name. Now, if both these variables were public, it would create conflict, and hence it is better to declare them private. In this way, the variables of a class are hidden from the other classes, and hence the term used is data hiding. Now sometimes, this data hiding is useful within a class as well, and hence the visibility modifier protected becomes important here. Protected is only used for highly private data, and hence it is rarely used. So, the class variables are mostly private while the functions are mostly public. Now, the modifier internal is mostly used in large software where multiple modules are present. So in general, the public modifier has maximum visibility. Then comes the internal modifier, then private, and then finally the protected modifier. So that was about the visibility modifiers. Click Next whenever you are ready.